Hello. Hello.
Morning.
Friday's post negative. Oh, yeah. Their milk. It was, are we sure we would be able to do it? That clock's worse than
What a weekend, huh? What a weekend.
You're just getting warmed up.
I know, but for what? Like, what's the thing of it? It's like an internal work. You're getting warmed up for winter. Is it in your wife vodka so early in the morning? Yeah. All right.
But the judges really left the judge said, bring class.
Good morning. Boker Tov. I'm very happy to begin the new season of Hall of the Bagel. Right? There's an ancient Talmudic controversy. When does something become a tradition? Is it if you do it for the second time, or if you do it for the third time? I'm not exactly sure that it's a real controversy in the Talmud. I think I just invented it. Yet, because this is the second year that we're starting the season, one might ask, is it now a tradition? Or do we have to wait one more year? So tell me next year, okay? It's nonetheless very, very exciting. I think that our ability to gather and study together and be in this intellectual and cultural journey is a big deal. And adult education and actually education for all ages. We're also starting Hebrew school. If you noticed all the slightly shorter people, well, some of them actually are taller than us, right? But the younger people who are filling our hallways Sunday morning, it's really beautiful to see the enthusiasm, and the teachers are excited and they're excited. However, Jewish learning doesn't stop at your bar bat mitzvah, and human learning doesn't stop, I hope, ever, right? Fred Van Doren here just shared with me that he's just warming up, and he's been around for a while, right? So every day hopefully is an opportunity to learn something. And this year we have a very robust Whole of the Bagel program and a very robust adult ed program. So before we delve into our topic at hand, which is well, we call it sin forgiveness in Judaism, which is part of a mini series of how different cultures approach that. So Judaism, the be a Christian representative, a Muslim representative, a representative from the Church of Latter-day Saints, and a representative from the religion of psychology, who are going to be sharing with us different approaches and aspects of how to think about that. That's going to be a mini-series within a mini-series, but I want to kind of like go over the year and the opportunities that we have. So tomorrow, on Monday, we're reigniting kind of like a adult ed beginners track. There'll be an opportunity for people who never learned Hebrew before to study Hebrew from 6 to 7 p.m. And I, as someone who speaks Hebrew, it's my mother tongue, I said that if you're interested in really understanding prayer, Bible, Judaism, Kabbalah, spirituality, modern Israel, whatever it is that connects you to Jewish culture, Hebrew is probably a good way to go about it. So should you have the time, or if you know anyone that can benefit from it, it's still not too late to enroll. You can enroll by tomorrow. You can come and try the class. It's going to be harder to join while they're already knowing the alphabet. So that's your chance. This will be followed by 7:15 by Judaism 101. So we have it's really fascinating to see who comes to Judaism 101. We have a wonderful group, about 17 people enrolled in both classes. Yeah, it's a really good group already, which means that there's a need. People who are interested in converting to Judaism, but not only, people who are just curious about Judaism, people who've been here for a very long time, but never got the chance to learn the basics. Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating group. And if you're so called, or if you know anyone that might benefit from that, please. Tomorrow is the day to do. You can, if someone asks, can I just try out the class before I enroll? Of course. We're not, So along the year, there'll be, after the high holidays in October, there'll be 2 more exciting tracks that are going to be starting here. Wednesday evening, last year we started Rosh Hashanah, which nobody understood the joke. Rosh Hashanah means the head of Esther, but it's also Rochester in a weird accent, right? So I kind of like reclaiming the name of this town as an ancient Hebrew word that doesn't exactly make sense, but and I was kind of waiting to see who will catch on this little. So Rosh Hashanah became, and then I was teaching it, and then I said, let's expand the repertoire. And also we realized that for those classes, a semester might be a bit long. So we're doing 4 mini-semesters, starting late October. I'll be teaching 2 of them, mini-semester 2 and 4. That'll be Kabbalah, Journeys of the Soul, and Jewish mindfulness. According to Kabbalah, that'll be semesters 2 and 4. Semester 1 will be taught by my wife, Eliza, who's actually in the room. She'll be teaching the secrets of the Song of Song, which is the biblical scroll of love. And then semester 3, that'll be semester 1. Already a good group of people who are enrolled, and probably more will. And then semester 3 will be divided between an expert on Sufism, which is Muslim mysticism, and an expert on Far Eastern religions. Both of them are professors at U of R, and they're coming to teach here, and I met both of them. They're wonderful, amazing teachers, and because part of the journey of our Hebrew Jewish spirituality is acknowledging other world religions and how the cultures and how that echoes. So hopefully, if we enroll in all or some of those 6 mini-semesters, you'll get a very comprehensive spiritual journey. That'll be Wednesday evening. Thursday mornings, we're starting a house of learning here, a Beit Midrash, where people will be invited to arrive at 9:30 and have an hour of mind-body exercise. So that throughout the year will change between Feldenkrais and mindfulness and intuitive movement and walking in the woods when it's spring again. Continuing at 10:30 with an hour and a half text study, which is interactive. So it'll be, the teacher will be presenting the text, and people will break into little study groups and be talking about it with guiding questions, and come back to share what they've come up with, and which is a very traditional way. That's how Torah is learned in traditional yeshivas. You don't just wait for the teacher to teach you. You interact, you struggle with the text, and you come back with, for damage control to the main. Right, so that's kind of what we're going to be doing. There'll be 4 mini-semesters there as well. I'll begin with a mini-semester called Tales of the Talmud. If you've never study Talmud, you don't know that it's not just halachic discourse, it's a lot of ancient, somewhat strange fairy tales. And we'll be studying fairy tales about, relationships, about the angel of death, about mystical journeys, about the sages and the relationship with other nations. With really fascinating fairy tales that are each a passageway to the entire world of thought, of ethics, of spirituality. Semester 2 will be Rabbi Silbert from Beth David teaching about a book called Radical Judaism. It's a contemporary book, a fascinating book. Semester 3 will be me again teaching halachic discourse in the Talmud and contemporary ethical questions, yes. So then we have a chance to actually see ancient Talmudic discussions about, for example, war and peace, pro-life, pro-choice, different things, that are how you treat the immigrants. It's my way of not being political, okay? Seriously, it's kind of like, these issues that we think are like, oh, they've all happened before, fortunately or unfortunately for us, and current, history unfortunately only repeats itself. So yes, 1,500 years ago, there are already discussions and dilemmas and complexities, and we'll be able to kind of like navigate through that. And then semester 4, there will be Rabbi Dora Settle of Temple Emmanuel, who will be teaching her approach to how to read the Bible. So really, and then that'll be followed by bring your own lunch. So we're offering here a very exciting program for Thursday mornings. Those of you who are free in the morning, because you just won the lottery, or I don't know what, or worked very hard over your life so you can do that. Or just, I don't know, whatever, or just don't care about that, you can come on Thursdays, come, because it's gonna be a wonderful in-depth group of learning. And that there's Torah study on Sunday morning, and Saturday morning, there's a wonderful group as well, and there's contemplative scholars, and there's really a lot of opportunities for adult education. I think this vision of us being a community that learns, a community that craves learning, a community that sees learning as a privilege and opportunity of learning together, developing together, learning our culture, learning from other cultures, right? And developing our own is really, we're very fortunate to be building this and doing this together. So find your place in a class. If you're not sure, come try it for a week. Everything is good. It's all good. All right, about Whole of the Bagel. Let's just look throughout the year. Really, we have, I think, a wonderful program that's coming up. This little booklet is online. You can reach it if you didn't get it to your house. It's on our website. It's an email to all of you. Please forward it to a friend, right? Even if they're in a different congregation, even if they're not Jewish, and you think, oh, and you think they can benefit from this. This is the program to find everything. So as I said, we're starting with a mini series of 5 sessions. Now it's a days of awe. We're preparing ourselves for the high holidays. And throughout this time of year, we are thinking about teshuvah, which is my preferred. That's already segueing slowly into my lecture. My preferred word for this idea of sin and forgiveness in Judaism. Next, so very soon, God willing, I'll be talking about the Jewish, some Jewish aspects of that. There's more than one, as you can imagine. And then next week, it'll be Reverend Kathy Teal from Asbury First, a very important community. As many of you also involved in their social action aspects. We have a friendship, and she will be talking about the Christian. Well, I'm sure there's more than one Christian perspective. Her Christian perspective. Then the week after that, Islamic perspective. Our friend Ibrahim. Well, who's coming actually? Oh, Mehmet, yes, Mehmet. I thought it was the imam from the Islamic Center is coming later in the year. Right, so Dr. Mehmet, I can't read. Karabita from the Islamic professor of Islamic studies at the University of Rochester. Sorry, is coming to give us a lecture about the Islamic perspective of that. Then we'll have our very own Gail Ferriola was talking about sin and forgiveness from a psychologist's perspective. And then, last but not least, the Church of Latter-day Saints will have, so we really get not that we can bring other perspectives, but it's just kind of like, as we search for our own soul and for our own process, we'll be able to learn from all those people. And I'm not going to read the whole list, but really, if you take a look here, you'll see that it's a very, very rich and robust journey that we're offering here on Sunday with professors from UR and other faith leaders from the community, Christian, Muslim, really experts from our own community. Even Josh Faber has agreed to give a lecture this year. Right? Even Josh Faber, right? So really we're very lucky. We live in, our community has a lot of great minds in it, and our city, our greater Rochester community has great people, and many of them are going to share their wisdom with us. It's going to be a very exciting journey. So, yesterday we were downtown. We know Aronson, how many of you came Friday night? Right, and Saturday morning, some of you also, right? I thought, and then there was also a teen session. No, Aronson, and he's also performing later today with his band at the J Fest. Hopefully you'll be there too. I'll be there. Really, we are blessed to have Noah Aronson here and share his music. And as we were walking there last night, we went out to feed the guests. So when we were walking downtown, from behind the buildings of downtown Rochester, I saw something big and shiny in the sky. And it was a full moon. And I said, oh, this is the last moon of the year 5,875, which I'm sure is how we think about the current year, right? You don't think of yourself as living in 2025, you don't, right? Because you're good Jews, some of you, right? Or at least you're allies of the Jews, hopefully, if you're here in the room. So we don't count 2025. For us, this is the very end. This is the last full moon of the year 5,785. And about 2 weeks, exactly 2 weeks from now, because if it's a full moon, Rosh Hashanah is 2 weeks away, because Rosh Hashanah is when the moon is covered, is when the new moon is coming. This connects us to the lunar nature of the Jewish calendar. Which other culture has a lunar nature? A lunar calendar, you know? Muslims. Which culture has a solar calendar? Which one does the Jews have? Solar, or the Jews say, oh, why not have both? That's the Jewish way. It's like, oh, we don't have to choose. No, it's like, oh, they have solar, they have lunar, let's have both. So our months go by the lunar. So it's Rosh Hashanah, it's the beginning of the month. And then how do we make up the fact that the solar and the lunar don't actually match?
Leap month.
We a leap month or a leap year, right? Every so often we just add a 13th month to the year to catch up. Wonderful invention, right? So we have both the lunar and the solar energies in our calendar and in our tradition. And then Rosh Hashanah, which is coming in exactly 2 weeks from now, because look at the moon, it connects us to nature a little bit. Listening to that connects us to nature. Is when the sky is dark, because imagine 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, no electricity, right? So you're really more affected by the moon. When it's full moon, like last night, you can have a full moon party and stay up late. What happens when there's no moon in the sky? Everything is dark, which is why one of the names of Rosh Hashanah is called Kesed, covered. The moon is covered. And it's associated with the idea of Rosh Hashanah being Yom Adin, Day of Judgment. At times it's a little bit, scary. You have to think about, make yourself accountable. It's all connected. So the month before Rosh Hashanah is called Elul. It's the name of the month, the Hebrew month in which we're now. And it's called also the month of Slichot. Slicha means forgiveness. Slichot means forgiveness. And there's a process that we do leading to Rosh Hashanah that prepares us for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So totally we get 40 days, a process of 40 days of searching our soul, kind of like thinking about our life, reassessing. It is also connect, so when we get to the high holidays, hopefully we're not just coming to the high holidays, hello, here I am, JCC, right? Yes, it's gonna be at the JCC. Somebody said in one of the board meeting that some people didn't know that, this decision has been made. So I'm worried that now people are gonna come here in Rosh Hashanah and be lost. And at any rate, so yeah, so we're gonna, but hopefully we don't appear there. And then, oh, what do I do now? It's Rosh Hashanah. No, we want to start now to think about who we are, to feel who we are. And it's a whole process. When my wife and I lived in Nachlaot, which is a neighborhood in Jerusalem, that it looks just like how you imagine a neighborhood in Jerusalem, with little cobblestone alleyways and old homes. Many neighborhoods in Jerusalem actually don't look like that. They're very modern, but those old neighborhoods actually look like those old neighborhoods with, and every day from the beginning, so 2 weeks from before now, from the beginning of Elul, you'd have at 4 a.m. It's still dark, a person going and knocking on all the windows. Serihot! Serihot! And if you're in one of those homes with a thick stone walls, Serihot! And people would go out of their homes at 4 a.m. when it's still dark and spend about an hour or more in the synagogues before the morning prayer during that month with chants and poems and prayers, preparing their souls. Okay, so we don't do, I mean, we could try to do that in like Brighton and Pittsburgh. You might get some people like, water, get off my property, right? Right? So that's also different. When you live in a neighborhood, it's assumed that the majority of people are Jewish, right, and are interested in this. It's very different. But imagine that knocking on the window and waking you up early in the morning as metaphorically, as an awakening call for our souls to actually undergo this process. And next week, on Saturday night, on September 13th, I know the Fridge Festival is up, I know there's a lot of things to do, but please also consider coming here at 7:30. We'll be studying and chanting a very long poem written in the Middle Ages by Rabbi Abraham Ibn Ezra that is sung throughout Selichot in an English translation, and we'll be analyzing it and seeing how we can connect to it, and then there'll be a Selichot, that'll be 7:30, 8:30 a Selichot service, by which we will be entering this process. So you see, this is not a detached imaginary thing that we're talking about. This is us. This is our tradition. This is this time of year. And this is our chance to make it real and meaningful for us. Okay? So how do we understand sin and forgiveness in Judaism? And when I say sin and forgiveness, I realize that I'm speaking English, and those words have a certain, cargo, a certain cultural cargo attached to it. And I'm not even sure how it translates back and forth from the Hebrew. And I think that when we learn about those things, there's also a lot of unlearning that we have to do, because maybe we live in a Western culture. Maybe we live in a culture that is very influenced by Christian beliefs, of which I'm not an expert, right? But in our predominant culture, in our books, in our movies, in our newspapers, and how we think about things, there's also heavy influence from other cultures. It's not all bad, it's actually can be very good and interesting, right? But it may not be exactly how Jews have traditionally thought about this, although those cross-cultural influences have been there from before our time, right? So I think although we can talk about the word chet, do you say that? Chet? It's like just even that, it's like just me saying that is like we're already forgiven. You're able to pronounce that, right? Chet, which means sin, can also be interpreted as hachta'ah. To lachti something in Hebrew is kind of like to miss the mark. So if you're aiming with your, let's say you have a bow and arrow and you're trying to shoot. Let's say that Esther Tanzler has an apple on top of her head, and I'm this guy from Switzerland, and I'm trying to will him tell, and I'm trying to to aim, to focus on Esther Tansman's head and not a head, on the apple, actually. On the apple, and I'm trying to not miss the apple, but then I ended up missing the apple. It didn't hit her head, it hit the wall with her, don't worry. I'm not even that good, and didn't even hit her, it's like, shit. You say, I missed the mark, my arrow didn't reach the point that I was aiming at, right? Next time we'll try golf, maybe that's something that will relate to more than bow and arrow, I don't know. Okay, so one idea of chet, sin is not that there's something external to me that according to that entity I've done wrong, is that something in my life isn't exact. Something in the focus of me, of my being, of my soul, of my direction in this world is not working out. I'm not, right? That's such a different concept than, like the idea of some grandpa in the sky, like looking at me and see what I mean? So there's different ways to think about it. And the word slicha, forgiveness, right? How do we understand forgiveness? Who forgives who? Who's to forgive? And what's to be forgiven? What's the value in that? Right? When we start to actually think about those things, what does that mean to sin? Does it mean it also brings us to theological questions, right? Is there an entity external to us that judges us? Does it punish? Is there not an entity? And then if there's no entity like that, is there any value in this process that we're doing? How does actually the mechanism work? And would it work if I go to the synagogue and ecstatically pray and sing? Does that do it for me? Right? Or what is actually this process that we're undergoing? Right? It's really a question. And I think the main concept that I want to bring into the room is the word tshuva. Tshuva. How many of you have ever heard this word before? Many, right? What does it mean? Tshuva? Return. To return. Tshuva. So in modern Hebrew, tshuva also means answer. She'elah v'tshuva, question and answer. But the word tshuva comes from the verb shuv, to return. To return. And actually, when we talk about these days, we actually talk about tshuva as the main word that describes this process. We return. We return. To return to what? And from what? Any ideas? To ourselves. From what though?
From all the wrong things.
From the wrong things. And the wrong things are not ourselves.
We're not who we want ourselves to be.
We're not who we want ourselves to be. Right? So there's an idea, there's a concept that our soul in its origin is who we want it to be. And then if we have gone astray or wrong or been out of focus, or right, so we are not who we should be. And then if we do these processes, we return to like the original. It's like a computer that has too many bugs, and we like reboot it, restart it. How do we exactly understand, right? So this concept of return is a very interesting one. I think it's a very deep one, right? So what I want to do with you here is to kind of go over a few sources in Judaism. I don't know if we're going to be able to go through all of them. And the truth is that in many other topics and themes in Judaism, there's more than one way to approach it, right? Just like in Judaism, we said, oh, you can have the sun and the moon together. You don't have to choose. Something that's very interesting about our Jewish tradition is that, as many of you know, there is no dogma, right? There is no, these are the 5 things that if you believe in them, that means that you're Jewish, right? We don't really ask people at the door, do you believe in God? Do you believe in, I don't know, the Pittsburgh platform of Reform Judaism from 18 something, you know? It's not, we don't have that. People have tried throughout the year to say, Maimonides, he said, these are the 13 attributes that you have to believe in, and, but some people don't even know that exists, and there's, you know, it's not about, Judaism is really more about what we do together than what we all have to believe. You know, and we're more of a ritualistic religion, and then, you know, everybody thinks different things. And at best, we're thinking, right? Sometimes they don't even think. Right? And many people, if they ever took us, like there was recently a survey here about how we feel about the, you know, the war in Israel. If we ever did a survey here about God, you know, or our faith, you get very different answers from a lot of people, right? So yes, there's been many ideas of how to approach this idea of tshuva, forgiveness, returning, evolving our soul from biblical times to Talmudic times to the medieval times to contemporary Kabbalah, Hasidut, Jewish philosophy, and there are different nuances. Even in the Bible, you'll see not everybody thought the same. And I think what we can do is kind of integrate it and nowadays feel how it speaks to us, and different people may arrive at different conclusions. For example, how many of you connect deeply to the biblical idea of the scapegoat? The scapegoat, the Sa'ir La'azazel. That was a big deal in biblical time. Actually, I think I did not bring this source here directly, but do you know what would happen on Yom Kippur in the temple in Jerusalem, according to the Bible? There was an amazing ceremony. Everybody would gather, and the high priest, which has much cooler clothes than the rabbis nowadays, I don't know why we don't have these things, like choshen and, you know, bonnets, and did you have to wear that in New Hampshire, Rabbi Jan? No, they didn't make you wear a choshen there? No, too bad.
We'll buy you a breastplate.
Maybe for my installation, right? Right? You know, so the high priest would be there at Yom Kippur, the peak, the 40th day of this long process of slichot. And there would be two goats, not one. One of them would be sacrificed to God. And the other one would be cast to Azazel, which means that you should probably mean that there's cliffs in the desert on the other side of the temple, and that would just be kicked down to either die or just maybe even to roam free. We don't know. In the desert, just all right. So basically, one goat goes up, and one goat goes down. Think about the symbolism of that, right? And you don't know which one it'll be. So they'll bring two, hopefully cute little goats, right? And then they cast a lottery. Which goat gets, and at the very last moment, nobody knows which goat is going to be sacrificed, and which goat would be going to Azazel, which is like the abyss of the valley below, kind of like. And then once they cast this lottery and they know which one, they slaughter the goat that's slaughtered, and it's, you know, whatever, the smoke goes to the heavens to appease God above, and the other goat is being cast to the abyss. Why? And by this, all the people of Israel would be collectively forgiven. That's what the Bible tells us. All the people of Israel would be collectively forgiven from this act. Everybody's there, probably chanting, praying. You know, we actually don't have them. We don't have the videos. I don't know what they're, you know, but and then that's the biblical notion of forgiveness. You don't have to say prayers at the synagogue. You don't have to ask forgiveness from your friend. You don't have to go to your therapist and do soul searching. You don't have to do yoga in the morning. You don't have to do anything. You just take these two goats, One of them goes up to the heavens as smoke. The other one goes to where? To the abyss, to Azazel. And the whole people of Israel are forgiven. Does that sound appealing to you all? Would you like to reenact it here at Temple Sinai?
Feels too easy.
Feels too easy. Not for the goats. I wouldn't even want to be the one slaughtering the goats, to be honest. Like, not my. Maybe can we have like tofu goats? You know? So, how about 2 deer? No, that's, no. We like it too much, all right. So what do you think is the symbolism of that very ancient ritual? From which Judaism has evolved. For 2,000 years we haven't been doing this, and there's been other things we've been doing, but what is interesting about this to you? Yeah.
Why a goat and not another animal? I mean, that's why we have a scapegoat. But,
Yeah. Right. So why a goat? So by the way, I don't know why a goat. There's been different animals in the temple have been slaughtered for different things. And for some reason, it's a goat, and I don't know the answer. Maybe there are answers, I just don't know. So it's a goat. Somebody can Google it if you want to tell us the answer. Yes.
The duality, I think is interesting. I guess it's a very visual thing. It's a concrete visual thing for people who can't read. Maybe they were trying to cover all the bases. I wonder what the belief, maybe some of the primitive beliefs that must have carried over from idolatry. Maybe they were trying to piggyback on those beliefs and just.
So you said
spectrum.
a few interesting things. One is that these traditions carry out, just a second, they carry out things from long before, right? There were things there before. Judaism was a very ancient biblical Judaism, which is not exactly our Judaism. It's a very ancient tradition, but there's been, Canaanites and other people there from which the Israelites have learned these things. So that's one thing. When we look at those biblical depictions, they testify that there were more ancient things even before sacrifice of animals. The other thing that you said that's very interesting is that it was very demonstrative, right? It was something that people maybe they can't read, maybe they can't argue about Nietzsche and the Schopenhauer and how many of us can really, right? And existentialism, whatever, right? But they could see a goat and they could be part of the ceremony. So it's kind of like ritualistic. And the other interesting thing that you said is the duality. Think about the symbolism of heaven and earth. Something goes up, something goes down, right? And that the way to undergo a process is to give attribute both to the high and spiritual aspects, which is represented by our connection with the heavens, but that it's not enough. And in order to go through repentance and return, you also need to go deep, right? And the scapegoat going into Azazel, into the cliffs, into the valleys of the creeks. By the way, on the eastern side of Jerusalem, there's if you've been, it's a big drop going to the actually lowest place on earth, not covered by water, which is called where the Dead Sea is. So it really is very dramatic, and it drops, and there's big cliffs there. So the goat going down, they really symbolize going to the depth of our souls, to the places maybe in modern terms we'll call the unconscious, or the less approachable areas, the shadowy places of who we are. And the idea that if we want to transform and evolve and repent, we have to kind of like be able to reach both. Yes.
I was just thinking it's heaven and hell.
Mhm.
And the concept of, because basically the scapegoat was like all the sins of the community was on that go
Right, everybody casted their sins, yeah.
cast their sins onto the
Mhm.
scapegoat. And in essence, it's the whole concept of, that's where hell is how I.
Right, and what you're saying is fascinating precisely because in the Bible, there's no heaven and hell.
Yes, that description.
You know, and maybe hey, because it's a few thousand years later, and then we've been, again, heavily influenced by a culture. And in some depictions of Judaism, where heaven and hell, came in. But I think mostly, our influences from Catholic tradition, where heaven and hell are very important in that, dogma, or different cultures that believed in it, but, and I can see the similarities, certainly, but for the people in the Bible, that heaven and hell it doesn't exist. There's no heaven, there's no hell, there's only this ceremony and purifying the people. Yes, Rabbi Jen?
Yeah, it's fine.
I'm just, it's like I'm just protecting the union,
Michael Marmor just published a book called Letters from Israel 2025. I don't know if you've seen it, and he dedicates a full chapter to Azazel.
Mhm.
And he has an interesting perspective. Besides sourcing all these other intercultural connections, he makes a linguistic comparison between Azazel and Aza,
Mhm.
which is Gaza in Hebrew,
Mhm.
the Aza of God, if you will. And he develops that by saying that the goat, first of all, is a goat because a goat has the ability to climb up the abyss and possibly return, like the ibexes in Israel, the mountain goats. And therefore, it just keeps coming back to you. And he parses out the Azazel that goes into the pit as the enemy, as the physical enemy, as opposed to the internal, if you will, the enemy that we expiate with the offering that goes up to God in the second go. So there's a piece of it that is very political, actually. It's
Mhm.
very much associated with the nation of Israel, if you will. So he does parse that out, that it will come back to you, and that it is external. And he opens up the question of, so what do you do with the Azazel? For him, it's most important, not that the ritual happens, but what do you do with it? And especially when it comes back. And I wonder, he doesn't particularly associate it with Teshuvah,
Mhm.
but the association is kind of there,
Yeah, so, well, first, thanks for sharing too. I had not read the book, although Michael Marmor, he's from HUC Jerusalem, so he was one of my main teachers throughout my ordination and process and learning, and he's amazing. So I'm looking forward to reading the book. And not to give too many spoilers, but if you appear at Temple Sinai, well, at JCC, Rosh Hashanah morning, I'll be talking about Gaza, and the stronghold that it means. That's my plan. Yes, to make these connections. It's interesting, the word Azazel is not only, Az means strong, stubborn, right? And thank you for the thought that the goat, like an ibex, is something, I love that it can actually survive. That's what I said before, that it can actually survive the fall. It may not necessarily die. But the word Azazel has Az, which means strong, but also has El, God. So maybe Azazel means something which is very terrible, but also very divine at the same time. And thank you. This could be like a whole other sub lecture of its own. So yeah, so a lot, and maybe before we segue to other notions of because we don't want to stay at Azazel at the temple for the whole, I mean, Judaism has evolved. And one other aspect that's very interesting is, like you said, Francine, that the entire people cast their sins, and forgiveness is considered not something so much for the individual, but something that happens to the entire community, or even the entire nation, together. How do you feel about that?
Seems like an easy way to get out of something. Seems like a good way to help control
Mm-hmm.
people.
because,
Because it's, you personally don't have to do much
mhm.
to get forgiveness.
Right, so basically it's like abracadabra, it's like, oops, we're all, right, so you're seeing it as so the individual doesn't have to work hard, right? So do both. Do most of us see these processes as something that the individual has to undergo, a deep process? I see some nodding, you think that, why do you think that? Yes, Shoshana?
Well, it feels like today that sin and forgiveness are indeed very individual, right? I personally did something wrong, either through my actions or to another person. And therefore I personally need to be forgiven for it. And a collective forgiveness, both feels very like it robs people who are mad at me. Like now they're not allowed to be mad at me anymore because I've been forgiven, even though we didn't work anything out between us. And on the other hand, I will say I feel kind of grumpy at the idea of being responsible for other people, rightly or wrongly. I can see the benefits of doing that, but my instinctive reaction is to say, hey, I'm not responsible for that. Why am I in trouble?
Mhm. Herb?
Leviticus is very specific about sins,
Mhm.
and what is a sin against God, and what you have to do to be forgiven through sacrifice, animal sacrifice, etc. But we're not talking about, when we talk about sending the goat into the wilderness or sacrificing them, we're talking about something that we've done as a nation.
Mhm.
And there are many sins that you perform that you don't know that you're sinning, okay? And that's why we go through Yom Kippur, the sins that we don't know we perform. And so what you have going on here is the ability to say, as a nation, we want to be forgiven, even for those things we have done that we don't know we've done. And we know, as we look at the Torah, there are things like the golden calf, where we have to be forgiven as a nation. There are many times we have to be forgiven as a nation. So this gives the priest the ability to do that and not have to have hundreds of thousands or millions of people come.
In other words, there's so much red tape in all our sins, let's just get on with it, right? So I think it's no coincidence you're sitting one behind the other, because both of you kind of echo the question of individual fate or karma or processes versus, collective. And we happen to live in a very individualistic era, right? We live in a culture that sanctifies the individual, status or nature of the self, and we have individual capita and individual dream. It's very important to fulfill our, each one of us allegedly has some higher purpose or something, and we really, in our culture, I'm saying it a little bit, cynically, because I'm in that culture too, right? But and I believe in it and I live it, right? But people have to understand that putting so much emphasis on the individual as opposed to the collective is really just our culture. It's not so in many other cultures that still live today, in other places in the world, right? Think about countries where the individual is not as important versus more traditional societies, less capitalistic societies, right? There's other ways to think about that, right?
Gosh, I'm getting echoes of Torah study right now.
Yeah, you are. Well, yes, just a second, Francine, right? And then also what Herb was saying, right? While there definitely are things that happen with each individual, and there's responsibility and accountability and processes, and hey, what about my childhood traumas? They're so important. They allow me to be angry at the world, and therefore at my parents until I'm like 85, right? And in other words, there's the natural, the individual processes that we go through, and then there's also this amazing fact that we don't live in an island and in a vacuum, right? And that actually we're part, just a second, of communities and nations and other structures, social stratas, neighborhoods, right? And one could start to think, you say, everybody's accountable for their own self, but then there's the notion that, hey, what if someone was born on the wrong side of Rochester? Not that there's right and wrong, but you know what I mean? And all Rochesterians are holy and equal and everything is wonderful, but you know what I mean? If if someone's born in a neighborhood with less opportunity. And some of us will say, well, then, we can understand why they did this or that, or, you know what I mean? There's or even things that I think are so special and wonderful about me. Right? Maybe I'm more influenced by my society, by my upbringing, by my nation, by my neighborhood, right? So that, again, without saying what's right or wrong, what about, when you're like a Jew, and now you feel that your fate is influenced by things that you can't control because you're part of that collective, right? And the Jewish collective is being accused of doing something that some people don't like. But then, hey, that's not me. It's not me, I didn't do that. But it's, or being in America, right? And then say, hey, but I didn't choose that government. But hey, that's my government, right? See what, so actually, you can't, so the collective is actually very influential over our lives, and there's a little bit of this and a little bit of that, yeah.
Yeah, coming from a congregation, where Tikkun Olam comes up in conversation so much, if repentance is purely individual, you don't have the obligation to heal everything when it wasn't your own fault individually. That's kind of the collective view of repentance that underlies much of.
Yes, thank you for this comment, and we're probably not going to be able to go through all these sources, and it's fine, but it's kind of interesting to see, hadn't we gone through all these sources, you'd have seen an interesting kind of like come about, where the most ancient roots of ceremonies are like collective. The priest will absolve, and and you're right, there are also in the Bible things that people do individually, it's not either or. But from that notion of we repent together and we're forgiven together, you will see kind of like a development and involvement, even in the Bible, where people start to say, but there's also individuality, and everybody has to be accountable for their own, and there's a focus on the individual. And as humanity kind of like evolves or devolves, you see that
I'm so sorry to interrupt, we have actually Shin Gandam.
Okay, come on in, yes, come on in, Nadab. All right, come on in, join us, Nadab, sit with us. Right, so you see a process where people are starting to understand. Have a seat. Welcome, this is Nadab from Shin, everybody. Okay. So we see an involvement into, it's not just about the group. Everybody is a whole universe, and then as people become more aware of psychology and the subconscious and the journey of the soul and Kabbalah, Hasidut philosophy, and coming back to modern time with these notions of Tikkun Olam, you kind of see a return to the original biblical sense of the community. In other words, so what if I'm forgiven? So what if I'm a wonderful person? Who cares about me? I'm not important, right? What about the ability to repair the world and to transform society? And true, in our Reform congregation, especially classical reforms in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, the human rights movement and everything, and people would kind of like shift away from the personal individual teshuva to the concept of, hey, look at all those people around us, they are suffering, what they've been doing, social justice and many things that we still grapple with until today. Right, and I think that this is, and again, we're not in a culture of right and wrong. I'm just trying to portray options here and to show that when we are talking about these processes, one way to look at it is me, my process, my journey, my life, my accountability, my sins, my forgiveness, my return. Right, that's kind of like a spiritual, psychological, individualistic path. And then there's the path that we see from times of antiquity and times that until today of the community, the nation. Which nation, right? Which for us is complicated because when we say collective, what is the collective that we refer to as our collective? No, Aronson, who was here sharing with us, I think from the Bima or somewhere else, I don't remember which forum, he said, am I a Jewish American or am I an American Jew? He said, and for a while, for many years, I thought of myself as a Jewish American, and over the past 2 years, I started to think about myself as an American Jew. Which part of my culture is more dominant? What is the collective that is the collective that, and maybe it's more than one. Maybe it could be an American and a Jew, and both these collectives influence your life in a way that can even be clashing, possibly. Right, so it's a very good point. Yeah, anyone else have a comment? Yeah, over the back there, Ben?
I think, when I think about this in the context of the whole of the bagel, I think about how, the individual and the group forgiveness as two sides of one thing, but we think of them as both necessary parts of the concept of forgiveness. I think the ability to come together with all people and say, we all believe in forgiveness, we believe that forgiveness is divine, even if we don't go through our one-on-one argument right now or this year or next year, it gives us this common ground to say that we believe that it can happen. And I think that forgiveness happens in that space much more than it happens when people go completely separate ways and decide to live in either the shame of having committed a sin or the resentment.
Right, so thank you. Obviously, you're making a good point that, which we'll get to in a second, that these two ways to think about forgiveness are not mutually exclusive. In fact, there's a belief that we each and every one of us work on our own selves. Right, if we're able to make spiritual, psychological, ethical, processes and improve our own individual being in the world and return to a better version of ourselves, right, possibly, that will have an effect in the bigger picture, right? And if we influence the bigger picture and we fix our societies, right, we will have, people growing in better conditions, which would allow each and one of them to, it's not hopefully it's a process where we all work on ourselves and our societies, and we're expanding and evolving. As we know, it's sometimes easier said than done, right? Yeah.
Just to throw in a little politics, because we haven't done that yet this morning.
Yeah, bring it in, come on, bring it on.
I can't help but think outside of Judaism and how the world outside of Judaism views us as collectively sinning. That all Jews are responsible for what's happening in Gaza. All Jews are responsible for controlling the banks, controlling Hollywood, controlling the world. That collective idea of sin, I think, really informs how we think about Teshuvah today.
You're raising a good point, and you're also having entered into a minefield,
I know, absolutely.
And I think that,
I just wanted to throw
just
that.
to make things a little more complicated for you, 100 years ago, we were not in Gaza, and still the whole world blamed us.
Absolutely.
So drawing the line, and how easy would it be for us, American Jews, to say, oh, it's not all the Jews, just the Israelis, and kick them under the bus as the scapegoat of the world, and say, oh, we're Jewish Americans or American Jews. We have nothing to do with it. That would, for me, well, I'm saying it sarcastically, but I think that that's also something that some of us are trying to do, which I struggle with. I also understand it in some other way, right? So yes, when you're for better and for worse, and you're part of a collective, right? You sometimes enjoy the benefits of the club. And then when the stock goes down, you can try to sell the stock. So that's not, Nvidia crashed, it didn't, but Nvidia crashed, I'll sell it. I'm no longer Nvidia. You can try to do the same thing with Israel or you can, and that also brings, so that kind of comes to the question of, am I a Jewish American or am I an American Jew? And then what happens when the American crash? Well, American stock will crash. What do we do then? Do we realign with Israel? So I think that we have a challenge here, right? And I'm not sure that hating Jews or Israelis has to do just with the facts. It has to do with a lot of them, right? And that's a big issue that we're all going to have to deal with, unfortunately, not just for this year. And in parentheses, I'll say that there's a really good and serious group in the synagogue of people who are committed to leading us through this. And we gathered a few times, a few of you are in the room right here, and we just determined that success would not be that somebody will convince somebody else about, the column in the New York Times or their opinion about what they saw on CNN, our success would be that we'll be able to go through this as a community. And respect our even our differences of opinions.
And listen.
and
hear.
listen, like Shema, right? And learn from one another and acknowledge humbly that none of us can have the entire truth. Because it's a complicated reality in which we live. Not that there aren't rights and wrongs, and not that we can't argue, it's fine, right? So even, so when we are going to be hopefully presenting this group and involve the congregation with learning opportunities and listening opportunities throughout the year, because this is a very painful and important topic to all of us, acknowledging that even if we all agree tomorrow, we will not necessarily solve the issue, unfortunately, but that this is something that has to do with a basic question of our identity. And you can think about it as, oh no, I'm part of this collective, now it's a mess. You can also think about how amazing it is that I'm part of this collective and that we struggle together in this world. And, we choose that, so a lot of us can assimilate here. Nobody's forcing us to be Jewish, right? But we choose this identity with everything that it brings with it. Okay, so how was that little political segment? Did you survive it? No one canceled their membership yet? All right, let's see how we.
I'll take that on as my
Yeah,
sin.
yeah. If someone leaves,
I ask
if
forgiveness.
somebody leaves after this, Marcia, you have to pay double.
Okay.
That'll be your penance.
No problem.
So, all right, so yeah, we really, for me, success would be that we will go through these things together and get stronger, because today is gonna be this question, and then tomorrow's gonna be something else.
Absolutely.
And, and we have to figure it out together and remain together. Okay, so, anyone? Yes, Joyce?
This is backing up a bit, but personally, going into this season, and this whole business between the personal and the collective, I'm just gonna say that for me, a sense of collective, of guilt for the collective, irrespective of what's going on at this moment, but has been there, and there isn't time for you to respond to this really, but I'm struggling with that, just acknowledging, and how important is it to acknowledge, not just my own sense, but to acknowledge the collective in order to move forward, and how to get through the pain of it.
Yeah, it's not for better and for worse, we're part of collectives. Right, we're part of a society. We are, and we're not all just victims of its wrongdoings. Right, and I personally, by the way, I struggle even with guilt as a motivating force in spirituality and religion. I don't even think it's really about guilt at all. And guilt is something that I know is very strong in other faith denominations as a motivating force. I don't. Well, and sorry, excuse me, everyone in the room, Jewish mom guilt and all that, it's also part of our culture, but I really seriously, I don't find guilt as very helpful. Accountability, responsibility, awareness, mindfulness, a lot of other things, but just, being activated from guilt, I don't know how constructive it is. Realizing that we're part of a collective, and in being so, we have, again, you're invested in a stock, you enjoy it when it goes down, and you suffer when it goes up and down. Speaking of the scapegoat and maybe you can invest according to the scapegoat and the other goat. Maybe there's an ancient way of investing, right? We are part of both. Rabbi, if you show up on Saturday evening, on the 13th, we'll be chanting a poem by Rabbi Avraham Ibn Ezra that is sung in Sephardi communities throughout this time, and even before COVID during Yom Kippur, as everyone gathers in the synagogue. It takes about half an hour to chant it, and we will in English. And you'll see why it's such an amazing poem. But he was, among other things, he was also an astrologer, which today we scoff at astrology, but back then, well, maybe some of us don't, but no, I'm not actually, I shouldn't say it. Some people take it seriously. Mainstream culture scoffs at it today. Back then, in 1,000 years ago, that was like the science of the world. Everybody believes like in astrology to a degree. And among other things, he was a wandering troubadour rabbi. He made a living from two things. One was interpreting the Torah, and it was paid by the ward, which is why you have like the long version, the short version, the longer version of, and he was an astrologer who would come to places, and he said, you should know that everybody has a sign, everybody has a fate according to the stars, but also the village or the town has a fate. And if you go on a boat, that boat has a, and the bigger one always wins. In other words, if you have a wonderful zodiac potential to be very successful, but you happen to go on a plane that's bound to crash, the bigger collective that you're in will always kind of like override the smaller one. Right, which is an interesting way to think about how we have, when you choose to be part of a collective, you'll be influenced by that collective's joint fate or karma or whatever, right? So if you take a look at some of the biblical sources here, we see that even in the Bible, there's, the Bible is not one book. The Hebrew Bible consists of 24 books. And many of them are written in very different, they could have been written 1,000 years apart by very different people in very different circumstances. Right? Herb, you were talking about the individual processes in Leviticus, which we've been reading in Torah study all throughout last year. And how fun was that, right? Join our group every Saturday morning at 9:15. Shoshana, Herb, a lot of people here in that group. Right? They shall return what they have stolen or what they have gotten by oppression. Right, this is talking about sin and forgiveness, and in the sense of just civil law, right? You steal something, you return it, you pay compensation. So it wasn't just a scapegoat. On this day, however, on this day, Yom Kippur, atonement shall be made for you to cleanse you from all your sins. You shall be clean before the Lord. We still read that verse in our liturgy today, but it alludes to that scapegoat ceremony that we're talking about. We'll be singing, this is a bad translation, you create a pure heart within me, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. That's Psalms. Right? So this idea, unlike Leviticus, which is very technical, like in Leviticus, they don't talk about emotions and the heart, and we don't have an internal world according to Leviticus, but in Psalms, right? In Psalms, we see that Yeshua is basically a psychological, spiritual process. We pray to God to purify our hearts and renew a soul, renew a spirit within me. Right? It's very different than Leviticus. So is Teshuvah technical? Is Teshuvah spiritual? Is it psychological? The Bible has more than one answer. Ezekiel, the person who sins shall die, a child should not suffer from the inquiry of a parent. Very important distinction that Ezekiel is making, that it was not common sense back then, so a sin or a death could be inherited. Can it be inherited today? Is it? Allegedly, we think that in our society, children are not responsible for the sin of their parents, but let's say somebody, again, is born in a certain neighborhood in Rochester with a certain debt to the family. Right? So we always think about ourselves as being so advanced, and when we actually think of our society, we realize that when Ezekiel sees, according to Ezekiel, kids should not inherit the sins or the debts or the karma of their parents, but so often, even today, it is still the case that according to where, and you don't have to go all the way to India to realize that we live in a caste system. You know what I mean? So, not that there is mobility, some people do succeed to promote or demote themselves in the social ladder, but mostly, you can like statistically say, if someone is born over there, you can kind of like, say their life is likely to be like this or like that. So Ezekiel had a good point that we're still struggling with, right? Hosea, take words with you and return to the Lord, say to, him, right? God is not a him necessarily, but this translation thinks that God is. Forgive me for that. Forgive all our sins and receive us graciously that we may offer the fruit of our lips. So Hosea brings the idea of language. right? And sin is something that is not just a deed, but is also a psychological and a verbal thing that we do. Micha, he, God, right? He, she, they, whatever, has told you, O human, that what is good and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. That has a lot of people who are, in our Reform movement and talk about social justice and tikkun olam and repairing the world, are always quoting Micha, right? What does God want us to do, right? To pursue justice and love and loving kindness and talk humbly with your God. Let's segue a little bit. We don't have a lot of time left. The Bible always like we always get stuck in the Bible, right? But actually, Jewish tradition did not stay within the biblical framework. There's 2,000 years of post-biblical Judaism that influences us until today. So, in the Mishnah and Talmud, this is really a little bit of a huge. Again, you want to learn more Talmud? Come, let's quiz. When do we study Talmud here? Thursday mornings for the first and third mini semesters of the Beit Midrash. In the Mishnah, transgressions between a person and God, Yom Kippur atones. Transgression between a person and another, Yom Kippur does not atone until one seeks reconciliation with their fellow person. Ever heard this one before? It's a famous one. An important distinction that has been made in the Mishnah between two categories of transgressions. Right? One is between a person and God, which we really have to ask ourselves, what is that? Give me an example for that, right? In our Reform world. And so that Yom Kippur, well, if I have transgressed before God, I'll ask you in a second that, and then I go to the Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur and I pray and I pray and I pray and I pray and I pray. Does God forgive me for transgression committed towards God? According, yes. But if I, offended Marcia Birkin, and I did her wrong, and now she hates me because, and I go and I pray 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 on Yom Kippur, will I be forgiven? What do I have to do first?
Ask forgiveness.
Ask for forgiveness from Marcia Birkin, and then go pray, right? So part of what we do, by the way, this month of Slichot, before Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, is we actually do that. We go to people that we have, wronged and we talk to them and we reconcile with them. We wanna come to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur already with a clean slate as much as possible. Yeah.
Now, what if the person says, no, I do not forgive you, I cannot forgive you?
Well,
What happens on Yom Kippur for that sin?
well, that's a problem. So once I met some Muslim person, parts of Europe are Muslim, they have different kinds of Islam, in Turkey and in Bulgaria, those places, Macedonia. And I forget the name of that Muslim sect, and they're not a sect, they're huge people, like millions of people. And they told me that they have a very similar tradition where once a year, I wonder where they got it from. Once a year, they all go to their house of prayer, which is we call a mosque, exactly, it's called something else. And, but you can't physically enter if you still have a quarrel with someone in the community. They actually do that. They don't just say it like we do. There's a whole process where everybody goes and asks for forgiveness, and if somebody doesn't forgive, they go to the equivalent of the rabbi, the leader or whatever it is, and they actually bring it up. And actually, yes, some years you will not enter the Yom Kippur equivalent of if you didn't do that. Yeah, they actually follow it. In other words, they don't just say it, or kind of, right? And just a second, but to say that, to answer your question, we look at these things a little bit, in a looser kind of way. I mean, again, if there's an external entity that judges us, and it's only a Yom Kippur, then if Marcia hasn't forgiven me, I have a problem, right? But I would like to say that even if there is no external entity, and it's just between Marcia and I, then I still have a problem, because I have not resolved it. Or if you wanna talk about it in terms of tikkun olam, if there's still poverty in Rochester and homeless people, and we have, so what if we pray and we feel wonderful about ourselves, right? So one of the things that we have to reckon, or if there's, people being, I don't wanna get too political, if there's problems in our country with different kinds of people and we haven't resolved it. Right, also, so there's kind of like an understanding that we're not talking about absolutes. Living in a world where we can't exactly fix our brokenness 100%, no matter what, not the personal nor the social ones. We also live in the world where, we work on our relationships and our, wrongdoings and our awareness and our communication skills and our ability to listen. And all those things that really mean repentance and tshuva all year round. The Yom Kippur is like a peak festival but it's not like it's abracadabra, hocus pocus.
No.
Right? Yes, you can feel revived and renewed and uplifted and maybe, but actually we live in a complex world of brokenness. But through those cracks, a lot of light can also come through. And I see that a lot of hands over years, I'm also conscious of the time. And there's also the other side, our ability to forgive and to give another chance to another person. How do we got into the end of this page, the Rabbi Abraham Yeshua Heschel, our ability to forgive, our ability to believe in humankind, in ourselves, in others, to believe it. So what if somebody yesterday did something wrong? That today they could be a completely different person, right? That's also there. Let's take a few more comments.
If I transgress unknowingly, yes, if I do something knowingly and I apologize and I am sorry, but if I transgress unknowingly, will the collective prayers give me atonement?
Well, what is atonement and who gives atonement, right? I think that the unconscious sins are fascinating and a fascinating issue. In the liturgy of Yom Kippur, especially the traditional one, some of it has survived the reform renditions, and there's a lot of space that is given to the sins that I'm aware of and to those that I'm unaware of. And a lot of the work of Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah and Slichot is to bring things to the surface, right? And then if, when Marsha, Dirk and I want to work on a relationship, maybe we'll meet for coffee and we'll tell each other the long list of things that, we've done to each other to get each other's nerves and why we, so you can read, so one thing is try to, this time of year, meditate, go to your therapist, do whatever you need to do to kind of like bring things to the surface, talk to people, listen, right? And there'll always be things that we're not aware of, right? So yes, a lot of the processes that we go into prayers are trying to say, we can be collectively working, like you got my back, I get your back, none of us, we all have our blind spots, and we're all, for better and for worse, we're all in together. And the question that you also, again, bring is what is actually our notion of forgiveness and atonement? Who atones? Who forgives? Again, is it an external figure, a grandpa in the skies, right, who sits at a big table with like books or pages for each and every one of us, right? Or is it really happening only on Yom Kippur? Or is it really something that is a little more fluid and we do it all year round in Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah? And it's actually ourselves who are doing it with each other. Everybody can believe whatever they want. Yes, and yes, and yes, and yes, and then we're probably gonna have to wrap up. Because there's a social action event here at 11, right? We'll say a word about that. Yes, everybody try to be quick because we're running out of time. Yeah.
It just strikes me that one of the positive aspects of communal sin is that in a community that makes each of us sort of responsible for helping each other, live in a way that that makes us, that knits us together as a community and makes it livable,
All right, great. I'm not responding. I want to collect pearls of wisdom.
I just wanted to make a distinction between asking forgiveness and saying I'm sorry. The distinction being saying I harmed you, now I want you to do me a favor. If you're asking for forgiveness, you're asking for something. I say apologies are good, asking for forgiveness is bad. because you're asking someone to do you a favor after you harm them.
I love it.
Interesting.
All right, more words of wisdom from the community.
This is actually an announcement about the First Beyond Bagel.
Mhm.
So if you are concerned about the collective sins of being an American, and you want an opportunity to return and to think about healing, we have a Beyond the Bagel come. It's a creative activism, how you're going to make your voice heard individually or as a collective. And the added benefit is it's gonna be a guided activity for sort of awakening your inner artist.
Is it here, Sandy?
Yes.
Well, I think it's there. Okay.
I'm not certain.
So, yeah, so two more comments, then I'll read something for the, what you did get to the Hasidic thought, and then we'll have to end, yeah.
Yeah, we had spent years debating in Leviticus, it was with Jews, what is a sin? What did God mean when things were designated as a sin? And we've gotten to a point in our society where somebody's sin is another person's mitzvah.
Yeah.
And that isn't so bad because we're Jews and we allow that to happen. Other religions don't allow that to happen. So I don't know who to ask to forgive me, probably most of the people in this room.
For sure not Paul, because he doesn't want to. There's a long list of us, Art, we're lining up, You may not be able to enter the JCC after all, yeah.
It says in, I think it's even in the footnotes in our Siddur, and Rabbi Allen would often point this out, that if you ask somebody for forgiveness 3 times and they don't accept your forgiveness, then that person becomes a sinner, is what it says.
It's, yes, there's a tradition like that, which people can also question, because what if it's a really terrible sin? What if it, to your question from before also, what if there's something that someone that I can't forgive? Right, so again, we're not, all these things, yes, I think that there is a point to that tradition, because in the end also the stubbornness, like, if we can allow for other people and kind of like let them evolve and see their own brokenness, that's a wonderful thing, but sometimes it may be too much to ask. I'm struggling, or need to end the conversation, and I just want to read, not even discuss it. You don't have to, of course, in my fantasy, we would have gone throughout all these sources from Bible to Kabbalah to Hasidut to philosophy to modern thinkers. We only touched the tip of the iceberg here, in all the different ideas and thoughts that the Judaism, throughout generations, how they thought about repentance, teshuvah, atonement, etc. It's more than we can handle in now. But just read three quotations from a little more contemporary Hasidic teachers. One of them is a founder of Hasidism, Baal Shem Tov. He said, "Do not despair. Even a small step of return is precious in God's eyes." Right. So sometimes we're unable to. Maybe next year we'll start from here. Right. Okay. Have at least one more year contract here. So next year we can, instead of preparing a whole new lecture, I'll just bring the bottom of the page, right? But let's just read this without just let it echo for a while. Right? So Baal Shem Tov said, "Do not despair. Even a small step of return is precious in God's eyes." So sometimes we want to save the world or the nation or all the people from Mexico being deported, or but we maybe sometimes a small step is a good way to start. All right. And actually, our friend the Lubavitcher rabbi, the founder of Chabad, right, says repentance from love transforms deliberate sins into merits. Right. So the power. Let's read it again. It's very powerful. Repentance from love transforms deliberate sins into merits. So, in other words, if I do repentance out of fear, out of there's this grandpa in the sky, I'm going to get punished. No. If you do it out of love, repentance from love can transform deliberate sins into merits. There's a way to evolve within our brokenness. And Rabbi Nachman of Breslov says where a person falls, there they can find the Holy One, blessed be, right? And then he had a very turbulent personality and recognize that actually those places where we fall and where we're most broken, sometimes that's where, if we do the work, right, that's where you can actually recognize God in a very intense way. So these 3 tips, you know, can maybe, it's a good way to kind of like, summarize our discussion here. And if we're left with a taste for more and we feel like we've only started, that's great. Because we have until Yom Kippur to continue this conversation, both individually as a community. You know, there's more than one way to go about it, but go about it, all right? Can we end with a blowing of the shofar? And then, once again, to echo your announcement. So, we'll blow the shofar to end this kind of spiritually. However, this year, every time at 11 o'clock, after all of the bagel, there's something. We want people to have the ability to, you know, take all the steps, you get in your car, you eat a bagel, you chew it, you swallow it, you have to go through a whole lecture. Then at 11 o'clock, you don't have to go home. You can stay here until then. There's always going to be another lecture. Once a month, it's social action. Once a month, it's adult ed. Once a month, there's going to be a town hall where board representative will be here to present issues that the congregation is, you know, the leadership is thinking about and struggling with. Again, one of the things as a repentance from last year, you know, is that we want to be, it's not me, I'm not even in the board, but the leadership of the congregation wants to be transparent with the people. So one way to do it is actually just we can talk about things. So if they're talking about the budget or some ideas of development or whatever it is, everybody's gonna have a chance to talk to board members about that. And once a month, to my agony, is gonna be ask the rabbi. So people are gonna come and say, Rabbi, why do bad things happen to good people? And I'll say, I don't know. I wish it were different, right? Right, so there's something to do. So this week, it's going to be social action, and you want to repeat the announcement?
This is creative activism, a chance to, with a hands-on activity, to be creating something that you would like to use out in the world, send a message to.
Yes. So, thank you. So if you're so cold, you can check, you can stay at 11. So let's take a deep breath before we leave the room. You don't have to stand, you can if you want.
Maybe, you know, if you're able, let's stand, because people are already standing. If not, if you can't physically stand, you know, rise up in your spirit. That's perfectly fine as well. Doesn't matter. And let us just use the voice of the shofar as a tool of awakening something that is beyond words, beyond our divisions and differences, beyond our thoughts and everything else. It's not from a goat, but nonetheless, we can still climb up that abyss, right, Rabbi John? All right. May we have a good year, folks.
Thank you. Rabbi, you didn't mention in your list, in the beginning, in your list of courses, the intermediate Hebrew.
Yes.
Is that still going?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
So
I was
intermediate
worried that maybe it got
I
canceled.
forgot, I just forgot.
Okay, not a
So
problem.
intermediate Hebrew is happening.
Thursday night?
So it's Wednesday.
Wednesday night. I signed up for it.
So
but-
you're right. So the idea, so just like the ones that beginners before you do some 101, the idea is that we'll have, but that happens in October, not from now.
Right.
So you can come here, theoretically, you can come here and then stay for the Rosh Hashanah, because that's from 6 to 7 and then 7 to 8. Which you don't have to, but you can. So that's, yes.
I just worried that maybe it was.
Yes,
canceled.
no, it was not canceled. No,
Okay.
I think we're gonna have a small.
My husband signed up for it.
Wonderful.
so-
Yeah. This happened. Totally
Great.
happened.
Great.
Yes, very good.
Yes.
I just want to tell you, I just came back from England on medieval times to expulsion, and then from when they came back. And this remember the one you know, collective guilt, collective blame, collective everything.
So before I came, the year of transition, I spent 1 month in substitute rabbi. And London's the largest Jewish university. Fascinating because they have like their own stores.
Yes.
Yeah. I learned a little bit about them. It's, I got to interact, I got to teach a little. I learned their ways. I collect some services. It was fascinating. Lovely people. In some ways, very similar to us. And then it's also just a different country. And the whole thing. The whole thing there going on. So you enjoyed the trip? Oh, good. Look, when I make the mistake of watching the news, I get very depressed. And I'm getting more and more worried. I'm getting more and more worried, and I think.
And there.
Yeah, and we're gonna have to toughen up and kind of like rise to the challenge of our time. We will survive it because we always have. And we have now things that we didn't have. We do have Jewish countries. And we have in the United States. We have not said our last word yet. So we shall overcome, but it's going to be very challenging. It already is. Yeah. I work on that a lot because when I say I hate Trump, I don't care about Trump so much. I don't want to say I hate 55% of the American population are voters. And I don't hate those people.
You wanna wait up the video?
Even though they may think differently. So I believe that's very important. Yeah. Hi. Where are you? What's your name? And what's your name? Very nice to meet you. You I know already. Yeah.
We need to ask you for your name.
My name is Rabbi Zohar.
Okay.
Show me your name again. I'm not sure I got it. You were chewing your candy. Oh, you're Lucy. Lovely. I like your ears too. Yeah. All right. So now you know my name. Yeah, I reckon. All right. These are your reading words, right? Yeah. All right. You guys. Good luck. Excuse me. Who are you guys?
Well, we're navigating, so let's try and navigate.
Yes.
Whoa.
Great. Welcome again. Yeah, we are blessed now.
Last see what I went to see. Oh.
So you've been in Washington? Those were the days.
That's right.
Yeah.
Nine of us in a band. That's it for 2 hours.
Oh my God.
Between all covers and TikTok.
Well, I don't know. My kid gets to go.
And so really thank you all for having me here. Jokes were, as an artist, you're discussing this, but there are times when I you know, just providing the side is great, and sometimes I think you're really better and I have found that. When I was in my last workshop, I thought and I got him out of my car yesterday, and the wind picked up, and the wind was like going around it, and I was saying, the wind is behind John Lewis. So, I cannot wait to have you all do something that you feel like you are thinking or want to say right now. This is a great opportunity to put it on speaker. We're gonna talk a little bit just about the tools that I brought, very simple tools today, but I want to reiterate that you don't need fancy anything to do this, and you certainly don't need fancy anything. But I brought some key markers that have a very specific, you can use that to make your writing legible if you choose to slide by way. I did not bring in case, it's a very short workshop, but I talk to you all about how to use some of these things, whatever. So this is more about get over here to the paper, and cardboard, and the markers, and shoot and use them, and then get one thought out of your mind state and on paper.
Okay, how about, I did bring some extra phone work. Yes, I know, you did a great job. So let me, one thing I just want to say about these markers. Yeah. I don't know if people, I'm gonna kind of work on this paper right here just to show you a little bit of, just in general, you'll see that this is like a super fat marker, which is really nice when we're, and if we want to make a nice big mark. And the nice thing about this is it's a little bit awkward at first. You're thinking about how the broad side is the side that we're going to be working with. So I'm going to write, and I'm going to just use the broad side. So I turn the marker as I'm using it. And this is a great thing to practice because it allows, do you see I'm rotating my wrist? It's a little bit awkward at first, but then you get this like really beautiful line from it. So you're not holding it like a pencil because it's not a round tip. That's something, the first thing that you all want to just practice on your scrap paper, on a piece of scrap paper. There you go. That's that type of. Okay. But yeah, so, and then if you want a thinner line, obviously you hold the marker in the other direction, and then you're gonna maintain that direction. So you're sort of going like this, and maintaining it like this. And if you wanted that combination as I don't know, does anyone do calligraphy here? Yes. Okay, so it's the same concept, right? Where you have like thick and thin, and so you have that option, right? So again, grab a marker, try it out. You'll see a broad side and a thin side, and then you can kind of work with those two sides and see how you do. If the marker doesn't have that ink, you just kind of push down on it, and it reloads the marker. There should be. Yeah, so like this guy right here, there's no ink on it. So you just kind of, yeah, and that's it's nice because the ink just flows to it. These are nicer than these markers for this kind of stuff. These are just for Michael's. So this is the thick ones too. Yeah, although I bought all of them. I bought all of the ones that were available at Michael's that day. We might not have better stuff. Yes. Yeah. Go to all the Michael's, buy all the markers. Yes, not just our supplies, yeah.
Nice.
Okay, so give it a shot. Yeah, there it is. Yeah.